Just hours before the salon's grand chapel sparkled with crystal chandeliers and the lingering promise of forever, Liam Spencer stood alone in a quiet corridor of the Forrester compound, his back pressed against the cool stone wall as he fought to steady his breathing. His fingers trembled as he clutched a folded hospital report that bore words he could no longer ignore. The malignant glioma had grown, aggressively infiltrating healthy tissue at an alarming rate. He had vowed to himself, ironclad and unshakable, to keep the secret buried, a sacrifice meant to spare Hope and Carter the shadow of fear on their wedding day. Ever since Hope had finally found her peace at Carter's side, building a life of creativity and promise with the man who truly understood her, Liam had known that his revelation could shatter more than just a ceremony. It could destroy Hope's happiness, unravel the fragile tapestry she and Carter had so lovingly woven. So he had nodded and smiled at every rehearsal, spoken the ritual vows as if they were lines in a play while his heart thundered with guilt, and accepted the congratulations of friends and family with hollow gratitude. He had endured each whispered blessing. Isn't Hope radiant? Carter's love suits her so well, fearing that the truth would cast a pall on the brightest day of all their lives. Now, dressed in a tailored midnight blue tuxedo that felt as foreign to him as his own body did after weeks of silent deterioration, Liam leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. His pulse pounded like a rainy drumbeat, each throb a reminder of time slipping away. He recalled the moment earlier that morning when Bill Spencer, towering and steadfast despite his own battle with regret, had cornered him in Bill's private office. Liam had tried to deflect, patted his father's arm, forced a reassuring laugh, but the older Spencer's gaze, usually so veiled beneath calculated reserves, had cracked into raw concern as he glimpsed the dark circles under his son's eyes and the pallor of his skin. Bill had pressed a vial of experimental trial medication into Liam's palm, speaking in hushed tones of a radical new therapy that no one dared gamble on. There has to be a chance, Bill had growled, a rare tremor of desperation slipping into his tone. For Hope's sake, for our family's sake, try it. Don't resign yourself to a fate you might outrun. Liam had nodded, the weight of the news settling on his shoulders like a boulder, yet he had refused to let Hope's day become anything but perfect. And so, when the string quartet struck its first chord and the guests rose from their seats in the manicured garden chapel at the Forrester estate, Liam forced a smile and stepped into the aisle, his body a battleground of resolve and dread. The late afternoon sun gilded the scene, rose petals strewn along the white carpet, golden light filtering through the oaks, the gentle murmur of the Pacific breeze. Hope, a vision in ivory silk, floated down the aisle on her father's arm, her eyes alight with tears of joy, her gaze locked on Carter's as he stood beneath a floral arch that seemed to bloom just for them. Carter's smile was unguarded, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm of love and anticipation. Unaware of the storm gathering just beyond the horizon, Liam took his place beside his bride, his lips parting in prayer and his mind racing with every beat of his failing heart. The minister's voice washed over them in soft cadences, tracing the arc of promises made under a sky so clear it seemed ordained. Do you, Carter Walton, take Hope Logan to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. And do you, Hope Logan, take Carter Walton? I do. Each I do struck Liam like a bell tolling for the end of his secret life. He watched as Carter reached for Hope's hand, sliding the wedding band onto her finger, and saw in her eyes that unspoken question, will this last forever? He had no answer. He felt sweat bead at his temples as the minister said, by the power vested in me, and just as the word now trembled on his lips, you may now kiss the bride. Liam's knees buckled. A gasp rose from the crowd as he crumpled, the unfolded hospital report fluttering from his hand like a wounded dove. Time fractured for an instant. Hope's scream, Carter's shout, the minister stepping forward, the guests gasping and scrambling. Bill vaulted the low hedge surrounding the aisle, crouching at Liam's side, while Hope raced down the steps in her gown, her veil trailing like a wounded banner. Carter abandoned the arch to join them, his face ashen. "Liam," he cried, sliding to his knees to support his friend and former rival alike. "Stay with me," Bill barked at an approaching maid, his voice brittle with fear. The quartet's music ground to a halt, replaced by whispered panic and the distant wail of a car alarm. Hope fell to her knees beside Liam, her dress spreading like waves of snowy silk. She cradled his head in her lap as Carter knelt opposite, their wedding forgotten, eclipsed by the man who had once saved Hope's heart and now lay on the edge of losing his own life. In that harrowing moment, the beauty of the ceremony dissolved into stark reality. Hope's tears fell onto Liam's cheeks as she pressed her palm to his forehead, trembling. "What's happening?" she sobbed. Bill's voice broke as he dug into his pocket, pulling out the experimental therapy pills. "It's the tumor," he rasped, glancing at Carter as though seeking permission to unleash the untested treatment. "It's progressing faster than we thought." Shock rippled through Carter and Hope. The promise they had both vowed to uphold lay shattered between them. Hope's mind reeled. She had just become Carter's wife, exchanged vows that felt like a lifeline, and now the man who once held her heart was at death's door because his own body had betrayed him. The chapel fell silent under a gathering hush as Hope rose, her skirts billowing, and stood between Carter and Bill. She turned to her new husband, her eyes burning with a fierce determination. "We can't let him die today," she said, voice crisp despite her tears. Carter nodded numbly, his hand lingering on hers. "We save Liam first," he whispered. Then we'll see how to move forward." Hope squared her shoulders and looked at her father. "Call Ridge and Thomas," she ordered, her voice unyielding. "Get every oncology specialist that's ever set foot in the city. Find out who's running trials on experimental glioma treatments. Push them for answers. And Bill, give me everything you have on that therapy." Bill pressed the vial of pills into her palm, the unspoken plea in his eyes. Hope tucked them into her bouquet, her new wedding flowers now a symbol of both love and war. Without a second glance at the stunned guests, Hope turned and led Carter and Bill from the chapel, her veil floating behind her like a banner of battle. The photographers, once poised to capture a kiss, snapped images of the trio rushing down the aisle, their faces etched with panic and resolve. Romance had given way to crisis, vows to urgency. Love's grand celebration had morphed instantly into a race against the clock. In the hush of the chapel's aftermath, whispers fluttered among the guests. What will happen to the wedding? Will Hope stay with Carter? Can Liam survive? But none of that mattered now. Outside, in the late afternoon light, Carter, Hope, and Bill paused at the edge of the rose garden. Hope inhaled deeply, her mind a whirlwind of fear and determination. "We'll do this together," she said, her hand finding Carter's. "Liam was part of my life, part of our story. I can't abandon him now." Carter's jaw tightened. "And I won't let you have to make that choice alone." Bill watched them both, pride and sorrow warring in his expression. "There's one clinic in Zurich running a protocol with this compound," he said, voice low. "But it's unapproved, risky, might not even work." Hope closed her eyes, picturing Liam lying unconscious in that corridor, the secret he'd borne alone. "Risk is all we have," she murmured. "We'll sign any waiver, pay any price." Carter nodded, his love for both Hope and Liam forging a silent vow between them. "Then let's call the hospital," he said, "and pack for Zurich." As the sun dipped below the horizon, staining the sky with bruised purples and fiery orange, The new Mrs. Carter Walton, her wedding unconsummated, her heart divided, stood ready to defy fate itself. Behind her lay the chapel where promises had been made and broken in the span of a heartbeat. Before her stretched an uncertain journey where science and hope would clash in desperate pursuit of a miracle. And in that fragile twilight, Hope felt the true weight of her vows, to love, to cherish, to fight for life, no matter where the battle might lead or what sacrifices it might demand. Luna's descent into madness began with a whisper of desperation, a single thought lodged in her mind like a splinter of ice. If she couldn't have Steffi's approval, or more dangerously, Steffi's love, then no one could. Under the cloak of a moonless night, with Hayes tucked gently into his crib and the soft whimpers of the Forrester estate's corridors echoing through the halls, Luna crept past sleeping guards, past silent portraits of ancestors who had built empires on steel and silk, until she reached the infant's room. In a single, fluid motion, she swept Hayes from his cradle, his tiny fingers curling around hers as he looked up with trusting eyes, and fled into the darkness, heart pounding with righteous fury. Hours later, Steffi awoke to the hollow ache of an empty nursery and a frantic note scrawled in Luna's jagged hand, demanding that Steffi publicly acknowledge Luna as Hayes's rightful guardian, or the boy would disappear forever. The note burned in Steffi's trembling fingers, setting her blood alight with terror and fury. She raced through the halls, summoning every help she could, the loyal guard who owed her favors, the frantic phone calls to her sisters, the anguished pleas to Ridge and Taylor. But in the underbelly of Los Angeles, where hope and horror danced on a razor's edge, Luna's figure remained ever elusive. Meanwhile, Sheila Carter, the woman whose face haunted every memory of the Forrester clan, whose name had been uttered in whispered curses since the days of betrayal and bloodshed, sat in her small cell at the municipal jail. Her eyes closed as she replayed the familiar melody of a lullaby Hayes had cooed to her in gentler times. A violent tremor seized Sheila as the guard burst in with news that her grandson had been taken by none other than Luna. Steffi's pregnant protege, a woman whose love for Hayes had once been pure, but had curdled into something far darker. In that moment, every instinct Sheila had honed through decades of survival coalesced into one singular purpose, to save Hayes from the clutches of madness, even if it meant confronting her own legacy of terror. With a feral determination, she demanded release from her cell, citing her maternal bond and unspoken knowledge of Luna's patterns. Though the courts balked, Bill Spencer's intervention, out of gratitude for past favors and fear for his own daughter-in-law's safety, won Sheila her freedom under strict conditions. No contact with the Forresters until Hayes was safely returned. Sheila emerged into the night, her figure draped in a long black coat that billowed like a specter as she crossed the city's neon veins. Every street corner became a potential hideout, every alley a possible ambush. But Sheila moved with the certainty of a predator homing in on prey. She carried with her memories of Hayes's first steps, his laughter echoing through Forrester's marble halls, and the ache of all the times she had tried and failed to win Steffi's trust. Now, nothing mattered but retrieving her grandson and ending Luna's reign of terror. As dawn began to bleed into the sky, Steffi found herself standing before the locked doors of an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of LA. Phone pressed to her ear, her voice cracking as she pleaded with Luna to release Hayes unharmed. Across the city, Sheila crept through the shadows of that same warehouse district, her footsteps silent on cracked pavement. Inside, Luna paced with Hayes strapped into a high chair by ropes that bit into his tiny wrists. The child whimpered, his head lolling against the leather straps, and Luna's face twisted with triumph and delirium as she listened to Steffi's frantic voicemail. "You love me, Luna hissed, tightening her jaw against tears of rancor. You promised you loved me. But Hayes's whimpers shattered her resolve like glass. In that moment, the warehouse doors burst open, and Sheila stormed in, her eyes blazing with ruthless resolve. She lunged forward, a steel pipe clutched in her hand, and with a single, shattering blow to the rope's post, she severed the restraints binding her grandson. Hayes collapsed into her arms, his thin frame trembling, but alive. Luna screamed, a sound that combined terror and rage, and lunged at Sheila with sharpened nails, an echo of the violence she had once worshipped. But Sheila's reflexes, honed through years of life-or-death struggle, were unsurpassed. She caught Luna's wrist, twisted it until the knife she carried clattered to the concrete, and pinned Luna against the wall. Blood trickled from Luna's lip as Sheila leaned in, voice low and thunderous, "You will never harm my grandson again." Luna's eyes rolled with madness as the weight of her defeat slammed into her. The authorities arrived minutes later, drawn by the gunshots fired in Sheila's defense, and found Luna crumpled on the floor, tears mixing with dust, while Sheila cradled Hayes to her chest, humming a lullaby only a grandmother could know. When Steffi arrived moments later, her gown stained with desperation and her hair tangled from fruitless searches, she froze at the sight. Sheila Carter, the woman who had once kidnapped Steffi herself, who had once threatened her life, who had walked a path paved with the blood of enemies, now sat on the warehouse floor like a guardian angel, offering up her grandson with a trembling smile. Steffi's heart hammered in her chest as she rushed forward, gathering Hayes into her arms while blinking back tears. "Thank you," she whispered, but the words sank into silence as she realized the impossible truth. The person who had tormented her was the one who had saved everything she held dear. Sheila rose, her coat flapping around her like raven wings, and offered a nod of acknowledgement, no apology, for her pride forbade it, but a tacit plea for understanding. The reporters who had assembled outside the warehouse gates, alerted by Bill's panicked call, swarmed in, cameras flashing as they captured the tableau. Steffi cradling Hayes, Carter by her side, and Sheila standing tall despite the chains that had shackled her mere hours before. "This woman risked everything to save my son," Steffi said into the sea of microphones, voice quivering yet resolute. "She has a chance to answer for her crimes, but let no one forget the price she paid to bring Hayes home." Carter stepped forward, placing a protective arm around Steffi, his gaze flicking to Sheila with a complexity of gratitude and lingering distrust. "Los Angeles has known this name only in whispers of horror," he said, voice steady. "Tonight, Sheila Carter acted with courage and love. She's earned, at the very least, the chance to prove that people can change." The headlines the next morning blazed across every tabloid. "When the monster becomes hero, Sheila's redemption." Below, declarations and condemnations clashed. Some called for strict justice, others for leniency in light of her heroism. At Forrester Creations, the board met in emergency session as Ridge leaned over the conference table, reading the morning papers. Taylor pressed a hand to her lips, torn between relief for her grandchild and fear of Sheila's next move. Bill Spencer strode in, face grim, and declared that he'd arranged for Sheila to be held in a secure medical facility rather than prison, under the rationale that her mental state and her heroism warranted psychiatric evaluation before sentencing. Steffi, meanwhile, held Hayes close in her nursery. Each breath the child took a reminder of the debt owed to the woman now behind bars, but free in the hearts of many. When Sheila was brought before the judge, the courtroom buzzed with spectators. The judge, eyes weary but unflinching, listened as prosecutors detailed Sheila's long record of violence, Then, as defense lawyers recounted her life-saving actions, Steffi took the stand, Hayes asleep in her arms, and spoke from a place of raw honesty. Sheila Carter stole my life once. Tonight, she returned my son. I cannot say she deserves forgiveness. Her past is filled with terror, but I can say she deserves the chance to seek redemption. Carter followed, his testimony a testament to love's power to transmute fear into hope. And in that courtroom, as Sheila sat with tears glistening in her eyes, some saw a monster, others a mother. The gavel fell as the judge pronounced a sentence that stunned the world. Sheila Carter would be committed to a high-security psychiatric treatment facility rather than sent to prison, with the judge citing her act of heroism and the possibility of rehabilitation. The ruling rippled through Los Angeles. Activists hailed it as a humane precedent. Skeptics decried it as leniency, and the Forresters found themselves at the center of a moral maelstrom. In the days that followed, Steffi would wrestle with the uneasy alliance between gratitude and distrust. Carter would dedicate himself to ensuring Sheila's treatment was genuine and thorough, and Hayes, unaware of the drama swirling around him, would giggle in the sunlit courtyard, a living testament to a grandmother's fierce love. And Los Angeles, this city of angels and sinners, watched with bated breath, asking itself whether one act of salvation could truly wash away a lifetime of blood and tears, or whether Sheila Carter's redemption was as fragile as a soap bubble, beautiful and transient against the vast skyline of human possibility.